Welcome guys, this is Ola from Scare Me O channel. That's a pretty cool logo, right? Shout out to Aiden, thank you so much for that. We are continuing Spooktober. Yeah, you gotta let me know when that starts getting annoying. Yeah, anyway, I'm glad you liked the previous part. We are continuing that. We are continuing reacting to scary stories. I changed the source. I changed my scary stories dealer, if you will. Someone recommended a different channel with scary stories and I'm gonna use it. Today I actually watched a 6 minutes long scary story from that new channel and it actually scared me. Because the previous ones, they were like sort of creepy, sometimes a bit scary, but they weren't really that scary and we're looking for true horror. So we're gonna check out like 2-3 scary stories from that new channel I found. Hopefully it will be more interesting, which I think it will be. Because today I actually sat down to record Man of Medan and right before doing so, I watched like a scary story from that channel. Totally freaked me out. I lost it while playing Man of Medan. It's also coming soon. Let's jump right into it. Scare Me All. Spooktober. Jesus Christ, so many words that start with a letter S. By the way, apparently there's like a whole bunch of genres when it comes to scary stories. For example, I never knew that, but pizza delivery stories is one type. I was surprised the other day when I was recording that other video, but now I found so many more pizza delivery stories. I mean, I suppose it is scary to go to a stranger's house, especially if you're an introvert. Right, but this one's called School Lockdown. This is a subgenre as well, just so you know.
It was a typical boring day in calculus, only it was Friday, 7th period, meaning the week was almost over and spring break would finally be upon us. So everybody was getting antsy in their seats, I could tell. We didn't have a test that day like a lot of my friends did with their other teachers, so our teacher in the middle of class just decided to start playing games with us on sporkle.com.
As you do.
He was a very laid-back teacher like that. As we were doing some brand logo quiz on Sporkle, I remember the exact moment it happened. Right after my friend answered a question, I remember the exact answer too, Adidas. The dean's voice came through the loudspeaker.
It's like he's flexing over how many things he actually can remember. Okay, I get it. Your memory is amazing. Good for you.
He sounded panicked and frantic as he told all the teachers this was not a drill and to go into lockdown. I actually got the chills and I got goosebumps on my arms as our usually laid-back teacher too seemed panicked as he ran to turn off the lights and ushered us to the back corner of the room.
We
all
yeah.
sat in silence for about 2 minutes.
America.
And then the usual buzzing that came from a panel in the back of the room ceased, indicating that the school must have cut all the power. We all looked at each other, realizing this must be serious.
Is this what they do?
A few more minutes of waiting later, we heard a man screaming at the top of his lungs coming down the hallway. 2 girls in the class actually started crying, which made all of us even more scared. As the screaming got closer to the classroom, the lunatic-sounding man started banging on the lockers while screaming, "I'll kill all of you." It was at that moment that I started to fear for my life. My teacher shushed us as we all looked at each other to see our peers' reactions. The banging then moved from the lockers to our classroom door. That's when one of the crying girls screamed no. The banging on the door only grew worse as the man started screaming, "Open up."
Shut up, girl! What are you doing?
2 of the girls in the class were crying out loud now. It felt like an eternity that man was pounding at the door. But eventually, he finally continued down the hallway, screaming like a mentally insane person.
Isn't this ironic that because of them screaming no, we might actually get killed? Not cool, girls, not cool. You have to be quiet. Although, this doesn't seem like a horror story at all. It seems like a usual Monday in a US school, doesn't it? I mean, doesn't it?
Until we could not hear him anymore. I'd say 10 minutes later, though it felt like half an hour given the situation, the dean came back on the loudspeaker explaining the situation, which was surprising for him to do. He explained that some apparently mentally unstable person entered the building and assaulted the woman sitting at the front desk, causing her to flee the building screaming, and staff wasn't sure if the man was armed or not. Now this was before the school had cameras or could afford proper security,
Good
so
hiding
the school
spot.
was wide open to something like this happening. The staff had done a sweep of all the hallways and classrooms and couldn't find him, so the dean instructed the teachers to resume teaching but to keep all the doors locked and to not let any students leave for any reasons. The most disturbing part, however, is that one of the janitors working the night shift found the man sleeping in one of the storage closets near the back end of the school, and according to rumors that were spread by my peers, sticking out of his pocket was a .44 Magnum. The janitor must have done something stupid to wake him up, for example, leaving the closet door open, because by the time a police officer could arrive on the scene, the man was gone. My entire class, as far as I know, to this day, has no idea if this man was ever found, but I like to think that right now, he's being given the proper help that he needs.
Okay then. I don't know if I accidentally entered some sort of stories from the US school subgenre, but that didn't feel like a horror story at all. Especially because that nice narrator said that he hopes that the guy that entered the school is getting the proper help. Which sounds so nice. It doesn't seem like he was terrified. And I think that the scary moment in that story was the moment when they actually found a gun in his pocket. I don't know. We're gonna have to look for something else, not school stories. I don't like these. How about scary field trip? That sounds like something interesting. Let's go for it.
Back in high school, I took a mysteries and mythology type class, or something like that. I don't remember the name of the class. It basically just had to do with real life mysteries and creepy shit. I was into that kind of stuff.
Is that a class?
I was taking the class
Really?
with a good friend, who I'll call Ben for this story. The teacher of the class took us on a field trip to a nearby abandoned village with an unknown past. The village was built in the early 1900s, but seems as though it had been quickly abandoned shortly after it was built. The bus ride there was about 20 minutes. All of us were glued to the bus windows as we pulled up some sketchy-looking, decrepit road cutting through dense forest. The road eventually led to a clearing.
That teacher doesn't sound like a responsible guy. I don't know why we're still in that school subgenre. I thought that a field trip would be scarier, but what if there's a person with a gun again and this is supposed to be scary? I don't know. Maybe I should start reacting to these like caught on a front door camera or something. I don't know. I never know what to believe.
We were there. We stepped out onto the road, which had grass growing through the cracks. The grass surrounding was almost knee-high. Then there were the buildings. The tall, archaic brick buildings with the boarded-up windows all gave off such chilling vibes.
Is that a night
The
time?
teacher lined all 20 of us up, counted heads, and then began leading the way. The point of this little field trip was to use the so-called skills we learned in class to see if we could put anything together about why the village may have been abandoned so long ago.
What if the teacher is the true mastermind behind all of that? What if the teacher plotted it and there's like a danger out there in the... Yeah, but then everyone would know that. That's him. Never mind.
Some of the buildings had holes in the walls to serve as entryways. There were even holes in the ground next to some of the buildings, seemingly dug to get into the basements of some of the buildings, which seemed creepy. There was one building though. It stood taller than any of the others. It just intrigued me the most.
Because it
While
was
the teacher was
taller.
leading the group towards the village church, Ben and I decided to sneak off on our own to look for anything interesting.
Crazy!
When we walked off in the
Don't.
direction of the tallest building, we saw a hole in the ground. It was dug by the back door of the building, which had been sealed off. In the hole was a ladder which led down to the concrete floor below. We both looked at each other and knew we had to do it. Ben climbed down first, then me. Luckily, this was just
Unreasonable.
around the time Apple started putting flashlights on their phones, so we had a source of light.
Seriously, did he just really say this was around the time Apple started putting flashlights in their phone? Is that like a sponsored video or something?
It was creepy down there. There were a couple of beer bottles, one graffiti tag on the wall, and dusty wooden planks everywhere. There was a wooden stairway which led up to complete darkness, since all windows and doors had been sealed shut from above. We had already gone as far as to enter the building, so we figured we'd go up the stairs too. I went first, and with each step, The creakiness of the 100-year-old wood made me feel as if I was going to fall through each and every step. Ben followed suit.
I mean, great, but...
This floor of the building was very tight. It seemed like there were many openings going off into different, smaller rooms. It was so dark in there, you would never even guess it was daytime. Ben and I were honestly starting to get creeped out in there, and agreed to go back outside. But just then, there was a noise in one of the tiny rooms. Like a big rock hitting the concrete floor. A normal instinct would be to run, but Ben and I froze, locked eyes for a moment, then both tiptoed over to the opening of the room. We shined the lights into the room and ran. We ran back down the stairs and then up the rusty ladder back outside. We caught up to the group out of breath. We didn't say anything though to avoid getting in trouble. One of our classmates asked us what was wrong. We told him we snuck into one of the buildings, and in one of the rooms, when we shined the light into it, we saw 3 guys standing maybe 10 feet away from the doorway, facing Ben and I in a weird formation, as if they were waiting for us.
Oh!
As we continued following the group, we paid extra attention to the tall building we entered from the distance, and before leaving, we saw a person's face at one of the higher level windows that had not been boarded up. We never told the teacher in fear of getting in trouble. We didn't know what to think. Were those just homeless people living in there? Were they gang members in hiding? Ben freaks me out with his theory. He says they were ghosts of the people who once lived in the town. Still, the way the 3 guys were just hauntingly standing there so calmly, staring at us the moment we peeked our heads through that doorway, I still can't get that image out of my head. I may go back to that village one day, just to prove Ben's idea wrong.
How are you going to prove it wrong? Wait, is that him? Is he going back? At night? Alone? Or is this a dream? What are you doing? Why? Run for your life, bastard! What happened? Right, that was somewhat scary, but it's still not the level of creepiness that I'm looking for. Still not that level. Although I like these more than the other channel, so that's a good recommendation, thanks. But I gotta say, they have these eyes, they look like The Simpsons. Anytime I think of that, it's like The Simpsons. Let's check out one more though. Hide and seek. Now that sounds scary, that sounds actually scary. Although if you think about it, almost every horror story is a hide and seek story. More like seek and run. I don't know what I'm talking about. There's a hide and seek one, okay? Let's just watch that one.
When I was a kid, my parents would sometimes bring me down to my aunt and uncle's place to stay for the weekend. Mainly, I'd spend time playing with my 2 cousins who were around the same age as me. They lived on a small farm with plenty of open space, and we could run around doing pretty much whatever we wanted. If we thought we could get away with it, the 3 of us would sometimes cross over to the neighboring farm about half a mile away. It had been abandoned for decades, with a scattering of derelict buildings and other structures still standing on the property, just begging to be explored.
Actually, I used to spend my summers outside of the city as well. Me and my best friend would go to that abandoned house. It's like a household, like a... I don't know if it's a farm, possibly a farm. Middle of a field, a couple of buildings, totally abandoned. Apparently like a thunder hit it a couple of times. Nothing scary ever happened. I remember we dared each other to approach it. We were standing out in the field and each of us would have to approach it alone and then run back. I remember I was very scared whenever I do it, but nothing ever happened. We had plenty of adventures, let me get this straight. Like, we had plenty of adventures. Some of them were pretty scary, but nothing close to that place.
This was of course a goldmine for 3 adventurous young boys such as ourselves. Especially after my cousins told me stories about the deaths that took place in the house. It was pretty classic fare. Man goes crazy, axe murders his entire family, hangs himself, returns every night as an angry spirit looking for new victims. Good, grisly stuff.
Yeah, pretty classic.
Even at that age, I knew they were probably making it up, or at least embellishing old rumors. But seeing as how the setting lent itself so well to such tales, I allowed myself to buy into it. One afternoon, we decided to play hide and seek. When it was my turn to hide, I ran off for a flimsy brown barn that had living quarters on top and climbed the stairs looking for a good spot.
It's opened?
There was still furniture inside, and personal belongings lay scattered across the floor. I maneuvered over broken dishes, tattered clothes, and crumbling books, eventually coming to a small room with a closet. Jackpot. There were even long black dresses still hanging on the rod that I could hide behind. I stepped inside and managed to force shut the folding door.
Are you crazy?
My only illumination was a slit of sunlight that shone through the crack in the door from a nearby window. I crouched down with knees tucked into chest and waited.
Look at him smiling.
Some time passed and there was still no sign of my seekers. I waited some more, debating if and when I should give myself up.
Give yourself
After
up.
nearly an hour, this was starting to get boring. My head drooped.
What?
I woke with a jerk. It was pitch black.
Oh no.
Drowsy and confused, I forgot for a minute where I was or what I had been doing. As it came back to me, the realization that it was now nighttime and that I had been abandoned here filled me with sinking dread in the pit of my stomach.
My god.
I tried to get up, but a sudden cramp in my calf kept me grounded. I squirmed about, waiting for it to pass, when I heard a door slamming shut downstairs, and instantly froze. One of my cousins? There was a brief period of silence, then footsteps at the bottom of the stairs. But not just footsteps, a thud too. After every other step. These weren't the footfalls of a child. They were slow, heavy, deliberate. I held my breath, praying they would go away. They did not. The noises continued to ascend. After another moment of silence, the walking resumed, this time along with a steady scraping sound, like something heavy being dragged across the floorboards. The footsteps made their way through the debris and wandered aimlessly through the various rooms. I thought I could smell something faintly putrid. The constant scrape sent cold shivers coursing down my arms and back. My worst fears were realized when the steps reached the bedroom doorway. They got closer and closer and finally stopped directly in front of the closet door. I couldn't see a thing. After an agonizing pause, they continued on over to the other side of the room and out the doorway again.
Run!
They faded away down the hallway.
Run for your life!
I waited for what seemed like an eternity. There were no more sounds now, and I was trying to build up enough courage to open the door and flee. 3 things happened simultaneously just then. I was bombarded with a smell I can only describe as fresh roadkill. I heard raspy breathing behind me in the dark closet, and I felt hot breath against the nape of my neck.
What?
That was enough for me to hurtle myself out from the confines of that nightmare space, relying on memory and scant moonlight to navigate through the darkened house. All the while, I heard footsteps chasing behind me, closing in with terrifying speed.
Oh!
It was a clumsy, torturous escape full of trips and bumps and blind stumbling. I never looked back, at least not until I had burst out the front door and into the country night. And when I did turn around, I saw absolutely nothing. There were no more footsteps and nobody was chasing me. That didn't stop me from running though, all the way back to my aunt and uncle's house. There was a police car in the driveway when I got back.
Yeah, I bet.
My parents were there too, worried sick. Everybody demanded to know where I had been. Apparently, when my cousins still hadn't found me by evening, they'd returned home to tell their parents. Eventually, the police were called in and informed me that they had already scoured every building on the farm. The insinuation that I was lying about my whereabouts didn't go unnoticed.
What?
None of it made any sense. It wasn't until years later that one of my cousins filled in a final piece of the story. He and his brothers had spent hours searching for me like they said, but the part they didn't tell anyone was that they thought they spotted me in the window of the bedroom I was hiding in. And when they got closer, they saw that it wasn't me. A young boy neither of them recognized was smiling and waving down at them and gesturing for them to come upstairs. That's when they ran back home. All of this while I slept in the closet.
Oh, that was creepy. That was scary. The fact that we suddenly felt breath in the closet. Oh, and heard breathing. And the fact that while we were sleeping there was a boy. I'm gonna let it pass that the police apparently searched the farm, even though we were there. I don't know. I'm gonna let it slide. That's okay. That story actually scared me. So I think we're gonna go after a specific genre like hide and seek. We're gonna check out other scary stories as well, other genres that I think might be scary. Okay, we're gonna finish with this short story called True Home Alone. Since I am home alone at the moment, it seems only right to like freak myself out, you know?
I recently moved out, and I already have a horror story to tell. The house I moved into isn't anything impressive, it's just a house that's appropriate for 1 or 2 people. But I'd say right away, I started hearing weird sounds coming from inside the walls. I first heard it in the kitchen, and then in the bathroom, but on night 3, I started hearing it in my bedroom. I was sure there was some kind of animal living in my walls. I just had to figure out how to get rid of it.
An animal.
The next morning, I didn't even have enough milk to fill the bowl of cereal. I couldn't believe I hadn't realized I needed more milk. In fact, I seemed to be eating up all of my food pretty fast.
He said that this is a pretty simple house for 1 or 2 people, but to me it seems kind of massive. Like it has floors.
I woke up in the middle of that night to the sound of breathing. Not my breathing. It sounded just like the breathing of a person. I flipped the lamp on and it stopped. I chalked it up as my mind playing tricks on me after waking up. The next day was really hot, so I turned on the AC for the first time.
He said this is a simple house for 1 or 2 people, but there's a pool behind it. And it's right there next to a forest and fields. God damn it, our standards are so different.
I checked every single vent, and some of them weren't blowing any air. One of them being the vent right next to my bed. I peered through the vent with a flashlight. There wasn't even a duct behind the vent. It was just the inside of the wall. It seemed that whatever air duct was in there had been removed. Unfortunately, I didn't look into the air conditioning system while buying the house, so I didn't know about this.
Yeah.
That night, I had to sleep in the heat with no AC, so I was up pretty late constantly rolling around and flipping the pillow over. Then I eventually started to hear the breathing again.
Oh.
But this time, I was fully awake. I knew it was real this time. It was coming to my left. I looked to my left at the air vents. The sound was surely coming from in there.
Ooh.
I grabbed the flashlight again and shined it in through the vent. I dropped it and screamed. There was someone's face peering through the cracks of the vents. The first thing I saw were their eyes, open wide and glowing. I screamed all the way down and out the house. I soon found out there was a crazy, dangerous homeless man living in my walls, and he had been eating my food ever since I moved in.
Oh. Wow. So he wasn't homeless after all, if he was living in your house. Huh, pal? I think these stories are meant to be true. Like, I think the person that's making these animations, they like check Reddit and other forums and places like that for scary stories, or like people actually submit them. See, this I can believe. I can believe that a homeless person was living in that person's house and that he heard noises and that someone was eating all his food. That I can believe easily, actually. That's why I'm thinking that people probably submitted these stories. Also, they're sort of told from adults' perspective, looking back. For example, the abandoned village story. I can easily see this happening. For example, these were like homeless guys, but as a kid, you'd get scared and you'd, add some details. You'd add more color to that story. But the scariest one was definitely the farm one. That really actually scared me. Right? Still looking for scary stories. If you have any recommendations, drop them in the comments. I'd love to check out. This channel is pretty cool. We are continuing Spooktober, which means this month we are reacting to scary stories and we're only playing horror games. Man of Medan, next part coming soon. I was actually pretty freaked out in that part. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for Spooktober videos. Drop a like. Stay safe, guys. This was Ola from Stop Me O channel. Scratch that. Scare Me O channel. Bye!